Highways. They're the vital arteries that crisscross America, helping the country's truckers transport goods, its workers commute to and from the office, and its OJs flee the LAPD. But what you may not know is that when America first started building its highway system back in the 1950s, people were often forced to leave their homes to make room for all these fancy new roads. And guess which people were moved the most? Guess.
The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 was one of the largest public works projects in American history. It added 41,000 miles to our interstate system.
Pretty much every major city in the country, New York, DC, San Francisco, Philadelphia, you have major highways cutting through neighborhoods, requiring the demolition of lots of housing and other sorts of buildings.
That as they're thinking about where they're going to drop highways and destroy neighborhoods, they invariably single out what they see as the worst neighborhoods in their communities.
It became a pattern in cities across the country. Poor and minority residents were displaced to make way for highways, and white residents used those highways to commute into the city for jobs and commute back home at night.
Planners had an uncanny ability to pick out the black neighborhoods. The route for I-94 in St. Paul displaced 1 in 7 of the city's black residents. Very few blacks were living in Minnesota, one critic noted, but the road builders found them.
Yeah, that's right. Highway I-94 could have been anywhere in Minnesota, but it just happened to displace the very few black people living in Minnesota, more commonly known as the Minnesota Timberwolves. And look, don't get me wrong. These highways had to go somewhere. I'm not saying no highways, but more often than not, that somewhere was right through a black neighborhood. Because you see, rich white neighborhoods, they didn't allow this to happen to them. But brown and black families didn't have any political power to stop it. I mean, what were they going to do? Take to the streets? It was impossible. They hadn't been built yet. And look, black people are used to being displaced by gentrification, even today. But at least when that happens, they get to enjoy Shake Shack for a few months first. These highways, on the other hand, they didn't provide any improvement to the neighborhood. They slashed a hole through it. And whatever was left of that neighborhood just withered and died.
From the beginning, the Rondo neighborhood was a haven for people of color. At its peak from the 30s to the 50s, it had black-owned grocery stores, credit unions, and social clubs. During construction from 1956 to 1968, Rondo lost 700 houses, 300 businesses, and the population declined by 61%.
In Florida, Overtown was the center of Black Miami. The I-95 tore through the neighborhood, wiping out countless homes as well as its thriving business district. Kansas City, Chicago, Boston, Detroit, New York City, Montgomery, Los Angeles, the list goes on and on.
Man, it's actually pretty heartbreaking to see how devastating these highways were for the black communities that they ran through. Streets that were once filled with black people are still empty to this day. And of course, these communities crumbled once a highway ran through it. I mean, highways, think of all the things they bring. Highways bring noise, they bring pollution, and if you're really unlucky, spontaneous musical numbers. I'm trying to get to work. I mean, have you ever looked on the side of a highway and thought to yourself, yeah, that looks like a nice place to live? No. You probably thought, I wonder if I can use the bathroom in that gas station without being murdered.